Hi, I'm Jim Soloman, creator of the SoliLama.com, and I want to welcome you to the very first Soli Lama show. Before we begin, if you liked this interview or you found it interesting, please click the like button down below. And if you want more videos like this to come right to you, then please subscribe to our channel. All right, so today we have a very special interview for you in celebration of the TVI's re-release on Omnivore Recordings. Jason Falkner was kind enough to spend some time with me and talk about the album. Jason and I talked for over an hour about all aspects of this record, from the initial conversations in the parking lot to finding the album a home. We literally left no stone unturned. For those of you unfamiliar with TVIs, they're basically a quote-unquote supergroup consisting of Jason Falkner, Roger Joseph Manning Jr., and Brian Reitzell. These guys pooled their talents together and applied their amazing songwriting abilities to the new wave synth pop genre. Now, Jason said in the interview during the parking lot conversations that we knew that we could do this right. And right they were, because what came out was an amazing album that sounds as fresh today as it did when it was originally released almost 10 years ago. This must-have album can be found on Omnivore Recordings at www.omnivorerecordings.com/artist/TV-eyes. One last thing before we get into the interview. Because of the length of the interview, I've split it into 8 different parts, starting with this video. But if you want to watch it uninterrupted, I've also posted the entire interview in one video, which you can go to by clicking here if you want. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to present for your pleasure my interview with the inventive genius, Jason Falkner of TVIs. Great. Well, I really appreciate you doing this interview with me because I just think that this is a really great album and it needed to be talked about.
Yeah. Thanks.
You know, I wanted to start out for people who are just discovering, this TVI's album through Omnivore and really take them through the birth of it, because to me, I find the story pretty fascinating because your collective musical careers have been kind of weaving in and out of each other's lives basically since 1990. Yeah. And researching this part of the interview has been really the most fun for me because, I even took out a sheet and I had to make a timeline connecting all the dots of how it all came together.
Yeah.
And what I finally kind of put together is that it's really one band, in my opinion, that really I don't think TV's Eyes would have happened if it wasn't for them. But basically, TV Eyes is, it's kind of cliche, but you guys are kind of a power pop supergroup that consists of you, Roger Manning, and Brian Reitzell. And you played with Roger and Jellyfish and recorded one album with them in 1990. And at the same time, Brian's in Red Cross, which was basically kind of like one of your musical peers, wasn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
So Steve McDonald from Red Cross is playing on the Jellyfish album. Roger co-wrote a song on Phase Shifter, but did you guys really know Brian back then as well, bumping into him in festivals and things like that? Or was it more of a casual relationship, or were you guys pretty tight with him back then as well?
Well, I didn't know Brian. Brian was in Red Cross when Jellyfish and Red Cross were simultaneously happening in the early 90s. But Andy knew Brian. In fact, I think Andy is kind of the reason that Andy introduced the McDonald brothers to Brian Reitzell, and that he joined the band. So there was a Jellyfish connection right there. I didn't know Brian. I met Brian, I guess, in like the early 90s, 92 or something. For a while there, Brian was talking to me about leaving Red Cross and wanted to join my band because I was about to embark on a solo thing. And I guess we talked about him playing with me as early as 92. And then the Grays thing happened, so that went out the window. But yeah, I've always loved Brian. He's an awesome guy, and yeah, that's how that all came about.
And so then you leave Jellyfish because of musical creative differences. I know that's been hashed out in many interviews, but
yeah,
one of the things that I found interesting in that last interview that you gave was how Andy Sturmer came up to you and, apologized for all those years, and wondering with you and Roger, when you guys start interacting again, did you guys kind of have to rekindle your relationship and kind of warm it back up? I mean, how did it come to be that you start interacting with Roger again?
Oh, I mean, absolutely. I was probably equally as scorned by Roger in a way as I was Andy by the time I had left Jellyfish. I mean, those guys were both, they were basically a songwriting duo that with me in the band. They brought me in the band because they said that they wanted me to write as well, and they wanted it to be a democracy and all this, stuff, all this propaganda.
Right.
And so then obviously the story that I've told 1,000 times is that when I joined, that wasn't the case. And they kept saying, oh, it's a great song, but it's not right for this band. I'm like, oh, okay, that doesn't really work, but okay. So after, 2 years of that and a full year of touring, and I just kind of like, when we ended the tour, I came home to LA and went back up to the Bay Area, and I just never returned. And I remember them calling and saying, come on, man, we're ready for you to weave your guitar magic on these demos. And I was like, well, can I write some songs? And I said, I have a ton of new songs. And they're like, yeah, well, you know how we are. And I was like, well, you know how I am now too. And the answer is no, and I'm not coming up there, and fuck off. And so, yeah, I mean, I didn't want to work with Roger really ever again. I mean, I just was like, I had been under their thumb for those couple of years, and I was doing just fine on my own. I was happy. I got signed to Elektra in '95, and that record came out in '96, and the Grays record happened. Obviously, that didn't really do anything commercially, but it's kind of one of those lost classic records.
It's a treasure, yeah.
That was a whole other situation that I just kind of like fell into that I kind of instantly resented. But there's the theme in my life it's a lifetime of resentment. But yeah, so the TBS thing, the origin of that is basically when Brian and Roger were doing this bogus sequel to this bogus soundtrack to a non-existent sequel to Logan's Run called Logan's Sanctuary, and it was this really fun kind of tripped out psychedelic synth soundtrack thing, and I loved it. They had me come down and sing a couple of things, like a kind of a Scott Walker, Tom Jones, like a cocksure 60s, that whole thing. And I did that and played a little guitar and bass, and then we were in the parking lot saying goodbye and just kind of, commenting on how fun that was. And then we just started riffing about, like, why don't we make a full-on new wave record? And, it really can't be overemphasized that this was like a laughable concept at the time. In 1999, this is before that whole slew of bands in the early 2000s that came out and started incorporating synthesizers and started incorporating
right
some of the quote unquote influences of bands from the late 70s and early 80s. We were still in like grunge fallout in 99. And so we were just kind of like, oh my God, yeah, it looked like something like Gang of Four and like Two-Way Army and, and then even like Duran Duran in Japan and, Valley's Car and all this stuff. And we were just like cracking up, like we could do that right. And, so we actually did it, which was the funny thing, because usually, I've had that kind of conversation in a parking lot or in a bar or in a restaurant dozens of times with like-minded individuals who are great. And we're like, yeah, let's start a supergroup or whatever. And I'm seeing you in 5 years. Let's do this. And it never happens because people are busy. And this we just like did it. And we spent our own money. We never made a penny off this record to date. And we just did it for love. And what happened was the original concepts were all kind of based around synth riffs that Roger and I were coming up with. And I quickly realized that this was going to turn into a joke. Like, I didn't want to put my name on a joke, like a pastiche, look at these guys making like a Moog cookbook.
Right.
Synth rock. I was like, no. this has to be like amazing. These songs have to be amazing. Lyrics have to be amazing. There have to be themes, and it has to be a real record. And so I just locked myself in my room and woodshedded and kind of developed these recurring themes. One of them being this kind of paranoid, whistleblowing town crier, if you will, that's trying to warn people of the impending doom. And the other one was just full-blown lust. And it was really fun for me because those are two things that I don't normally tackle in my own songwriting. I mean, my own songwriting is probably way more earnest and a bit more abstract and way more kind of like a love and all of its complications. And this was just like softcore porn.
So is that where the softcore name came from?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm pretty sure I knew that name, and I just thought, how can that not be the name of a band? I mean, and secondly, that's the most amazing name for this band, for this music, is softcore. And of course, there was a band called Softcore that also, of course, amounted to nothing, as time told. But we basically kind of got a cease and desist from them because we did something. I can't remember what it was. We didn't do any shows of Softcore, but we had a lawyer look into it, and he was like, "Yeah, they will not sell the name, and you have to find a name." So I was in Brian's car, and we were parking somewhere to go eat, and I had just bought the Iggy TVI record, and I was just like, "What are TVIs, man? I know it's just super blatant ripoff, but it's a cool name." And I also had a shirt that I used to wear all the time that was a really cool kind of like kind of a bootleg looking crappy graphic that said TVOD. And I thought that would be a cool name as well, but TVIs is better. So yeah, that's how that came about.
Yeah, I was wondering if the, after you had to change the name, if